This is a day of remembrance, but there is also a political dimension and questions about where the Prime Minister chose to spend this day. Lynne Groulx is the CEO of the Native Women's Association of Canada. She's in Gatineau, Quebec. Ms. Groulx, I want to thank you, first of all, for taking some time to speak to us today, an important day. And I'd like to begin just by asking who you think about and what you'd like all of us to think about on this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
Well, thank you for having us on, David. But so who are we thinking about today? We're definitely thinking about the souls that were lost, the children that did not make it through, did not make it out of residential schools. We're thinking about their families. We're thinking about intergenerational survivors. We're even thinking about, all of Canadians and what this day means to all of us as a country as we're moving out of colonization and trying to get to that point where we're really taking reconciliation seriously and taking actions towards that. And today is one of those actions, Call to Action 80, which is a day set aside to observe and commemorate.
Some people still struggle with what the word reconciliation means. On a practical level, the things that they can do as part of the pathway to reconciliation. And while, the onus is certainly not upon you or on Indigenous people to define that, I would ask you just for your thoughts on what individuals can do on that pathway.
Sure. I mean, and I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they defined it. And in part of their definition, they talk about taking action. So I think, reconciliation doesn't mean much unless you can actually take some action. So what can an ordinary person do on an everyday basis? Certainly, everybody uses social media. You can support Indigenous people, support positions, send out a tweet. You can make a donation. You can donate time. You can, inform yourself. Read a book, read an article. You can talk about it if you're a student. So there's many, many things that people can do and certainly have that empathy and that compassion for what is happening and support Indigenous people wherever you can.
Some provinces, and I would bring up the two largest provinces by population, Ontario and Quebec, have not recognized today in the sense that it would be a day away from work for many people to ponder and to think and to focus on truth and reconciliation. Why do you think it is important for provinces to set aside this day specifically to do that?
I think it's important because, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission handed down a report with a finding of a cultural genocide. MMIWG handed down another report, genocide again. This is a country with a colonial past. If we want to move forward out of this colonized past, then we need to have a concerted effort. And if this is a human rights issue as well, if we don't have a concerted effort, then it's what I would call maybe a fractured reconciliation. It's not a real collective coming together of the country. So we would hope that the provinces will reconsider and take a look at this as a human rights issue and not as a political issue.
Speaking of a political issue, we saw the Prime Minister attend the ceremony on Parliament Hill last night, and today his schedule said that he was going to be in Ottawa and in private meetings. But there are reports that he has this morning flown to Tofino in British Columbia, right on the west coast, and that he's having a holiday, a break with his family. I wonder what you think about, if nothing else, of the optics of the Prime Minister going on this day to do something like that.
Yeah, I think even more than optics, though. So this is a government that has said that Indigenous people are most important priority for the government. And that action that you're describing now does not match the words. So that's very inappropriate in my view for the Prime Minister. It's not setting an example. He should be the one who is leading this reconciliation process. So that's unfortunate and very disappointing.
It also happens on a day when he had been invited, according to the chief of the Tecumseh First Nation, where I think many Canadians began to become aware of unmarked graves outside of residential schools. The Prime Minister had, according to that chief, been invited today. And there was some concern about whether politicians should be taking away the spotlight with all the security and everything that comes with it. But the Prime Minister, according to that chief, did not, not only did not accept the invitation, but did not respond. The Prime Minister's office did not respond. Do you think that there is a role for senior politicians to play today at ceremonies?
If the communities are inviting the politician into their ceremony, then there's certainly a role. Absolutely. And that's so from what you're saying, from what I'm hearing, there would have been an invitation there. Mm-hmm. So this is very unfortunate because, again, we're trying to rebuild trust. We want to believe that the government this time around, they've been elected and that they will not break their promises. And yet on this day that is so significant for us, the leader of the country is just not there. Is on a holiday. So this is it's quite upsetting, to be honest.
Can I turn the attention for a moment to Quebec, where the Premier Francois Legault was asked about the calls that you and other groups have made to have this day away from work to focus on truth and reconciliation. He was asked whether Quebec would do that. And he said, this is Francois Legault, that no, the province needs more productivity. What would be the message that you would want to send to the Quebec Premier on the importance of this?
I mean, I don't even know how you could say that they need more productivity and putting into the balance human rights, people's lives that were lost, and that we want to move. We're a country with a colonial past, wanting to move out of that colonial past, saying on one hand that we want reconciliation, but on the other hand, money is more important to us. Well, human lives and human people are more important than money. So I think that we may actually ask to meet with the Premier and have a discussion about where if we can try to influence and change those decisions that are being made that are so we have no value. The money is more important than the people. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with that.
Can I just wrap up and ask how you are today, how your family is, how your broader community is?
It's a sad day. It's a triggering day. It's a day that we're remembering, families that were lost, culture that was lost. And I'm today in our healing center that the Native women, we have a healing center in Chelsea. It's difficult. It's very traumatic and triggering, but on the other hand, it's a bittersweet. We have an outpouring of warmth and support from the community and Canadians. And that's a bit of at least a bit of a help.
Well, Ms. Groulx, we certainly appreciate you taking some time for us today on a day of reflection and thought and pain, as you're acknowledging for many people. Thank you for helping all of us understand a bit better. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It is time that we embrace our real collective history, recognizing the painful past shared by so many, and that we all continue on that path for real change for our future generations.
The Chief of British Columbia's Tecumlup's First Nation speaking earlier. Chief Roseanne Casimir says there have been enough apologies and she is calling on the Catholic Church and federal government to act. As the country marks the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault sponsored the bill that eventually led to this. He joins us now from Montreal. Minister, I think a lot of political questions to ask, but I want to start with the importance of this day and ask you how you're marking this first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
In many different ways, but I did attend. I am actually in Ottawa today, David. So I did attend the march that started on Parliament Hill all the way to Confederation Park. I was there with many of my staff, many ministers, Minister Bennett, Minister Miller, Minister Dan Van Daal, and other MPs that participated in that march today.
And Minister, on the political question, as you were part of that march today, the Prime Minister was on board his plane going to Tofino, British Columbia, where we learned today that he's going to be spending some time with family. His schedule originally said that he was going to be in private meetings, and his spokesperson says he's meeting with residential school survivors or speaking with them, I should be more accurate in saying. Do you know how he's speaking with them when he's on his plane and flying to Tofino, where he's taking a vacation with his family?
I don't have the details of the Prime Minister's schedule for today. What I can tell you is that I was with him last night for the event in Ottawa on Parliament Hill, where we did meet with survivors, with Indigenous leaders. Many ministers were there as well. Many of the same ministers who were at today's march as well. I think the Prime Minister has taken a very I think one could argue that it is certainly one of the most important issue for him. You may recall that as part of mandate letters that we received when cabinet was formed in 2019, there were only two things that's common to every single cabinet minister, and that's reconciliation with Indigenous people and the fight against climate change. So I would be of the view that he takes this issue very seriously.
And yet, Minister, I don't have the Prime Minister here in front of me. I have you in front of me, and so I can't ask him the questions that I'd like to ask him. And one of them would be, what is the signal you're sending on this day that your government created, this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation? What is the signal you're sending when on this day that you don't want called a holiday, you leave and go on a holiday with your family?
I think this day was created in response both to the grassroots movement that we've seen in Canada over the last decade, the Orange Shirt Day. I certainly I've had many conversations with Phyllis Webstad herself. We even invited her to brief all of the staff in my office at Canadian Heritage, and it's also a response to one of the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think one could argue that our government has been implementing many of the calls to action that are as part of this report, but also that there is a lot of things that we still need to do on the path towards reconciliation. I introduced that bill, but I'm also the minister responsible for the implementation of the Indigenous Languages Act, which was adopted in 2019. And when we came into power in 2015, the federal government invested $5 million across the country for all Indigenous languages. This year, we're around $60 million. Mm-hmm. Next year, it's going to be around $120 million. In fact, last year, in 2020, we were able to meet all of the demands we received for Indigenous languages program from the Inuits. We're not there yet with Métis and First Nations, but we're making significant progress towards achieving this goal.
Because you sponsored the bill to help create the day that we're now all observing, can I ask you just plainly, should people see this as a holiday?
I don't think so. I think people should see this as an opportunity to learn, to understand, and to ensure that never again in the future should we repeat this very dark chapter of of Canada's past history. And I say past, but unfortunately the trauma is still ongoing for many survivors, for many families and communities.
This day alone and all of the discussions can absolutely be a trigger, a very difficult trigger. Mm-hmm. There is also a question of optics here, and I won't harp on it more than this because I want to focus on the day, which is what we should all be doing. But you're saying it's not a holiday, and we shouldn't look at it as a holiday, and yet the Prime Minister, whose itinerary said he was in Ottawa in private meetings, seemingly is off on a holiday, and maybe he's talking to residential school survivors somehow along the way. I don't have that information right now, but he chose to fly today to a place to go on a short holiday with his family. Is that not problematic?
Again, David, I don't have his schedule in front of me. I don't have the information, so I can't comment on something I don't know. What I can tell you is that I've had numerous conversations with the Prime Minister over the last 2 years on this very issue of reconciliation, and I think viewers will see that he takes this very seriously.
Let me just jump in on you, only because I've got a limited amount of time, Minister, and I want to ask you about Quebec's Premier, François Legault, who was asked today about how this day should be marked. I'll just play the short clip here.
Why not make it a stat holiday?
We need more productivity.
We need more productivity. Your thoughts, Minister?
My initial reaction, and you played the clip of that before a few minutes ago, was one of really shock and dismay at Premier Legault's comment. I mean, as a Quebecer myself, I really couldn't believe that the Premier, let's talk about productivity tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or the day after that. Let's talk about economic development. But on the first National Truth and Reconciliation Day, I think we need to dedicate our thoughts, our efforts, our work towards trying to understand, trying to educate ourselves about this. I think Premier Legault clearly showed in this response the lack of understanding he has. My understanding, I haven't heard it, my understanding is that he did correct his comments later on in the day, and if that's the case, then I'm glad to hear that.
All right. Minister Guilbeault, thank you very much for speaking to us on this first day of National Remembrance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.